Hi students, today I am going to take this lecture on John Donne. Before starting the details about this great metaphysical poet John Donne, the important thing you should note it down that we have to study about the age of John Donne. Because unless and until I will not explain you about the age of John Donne, you will not be able to interpret or blend those things which are required to write the answers when it is asked in the examinations. And that is the point where you get a lot of extra marks to make the examiner understand that you have a deeper knowledge of the subject. So, the age of John Donne was an age of transition. Though many things I have taught in the history of English literature part, so that is why now your basics, because they are strong, they have already taught you. So each and every word you can interpret and you can understand it very well, that what is transition, what do you mean by the age of transition. Here I am not going to explain this thing because I have already done these things with you. So the age of John Donne was an age of transition, and age of transition means standing midway. बीच में होता है ये transition. When something is going to some other place, it stands midway between the age of Shakespeare and the Jacobean age. And that time is 1572 to 1631. 1572 to 1631, age of John Donne. So, the age of Donne would effectively and substantially cover the first 30 years of the 17th century. And this age stands midway between the age of Shakespeare and the age of Milton. And apart from this, there is some overlapping which cannot be avoided because these literary periods or these ages cannot be separated chronologically. इनको हम chronologically separate नहीं कर सकते, and that is why you will see some overlappings. Now coming to the literary activity about the age, that this age was known, was famous, was remarkable, was affluent with a lot of literary activity. And we can also say that it was an effort by the writers of this age. It was a continuation of the Elizabethan age too. The revival of learning had influenced not only Italy and Germany, but it had influenced also England. And the classics were studied very minutely. And apart from this, they were also studied from a very diverse or a new angle. And we will find that this age is known for the rediscovery of the literature, the rediscovery of the culture, of the past known as humanism, which gave the writers a new horizon, a new outlook on life. The new ideal man was to be a perfect courtier, a perfect soldier, a perfect writer, and above all, he has to be a perfect gentleman. For all these things, he has to go with a proper training and a rigorous discipline to maintain all these standards which are there in this age. Now, as I have just told you that this age of Donne was a period of transition, and because it was a period of transition, we will find, we will see there is a lot of changes in the political, social, economic, all these things in the transition period saw being affected. And colonial expansion, increase in the industry and trade, and people becoming more materialistic. Even the study of medieval literature developed the minds of the readers. This is also true that education was not so widespread, but the common man spared no opportunity to obtain knowledge from any source. And medieval beliefs, they held their ground both in John Donne and even in their contemporaries or in his contemporaries. Fine. Now you must have heard a name, you must have studied, I have even taught you. Reformation. This word Reformation was basically a direct challenge to Rome. And why would Pope be the supreme in the matters of religion? Why? Why would Pope be supreme in the matters of religion? Religion, after all, is a personal matter. And no Hitlership, no dictation should be tolerated from outside. And the abuses, the weaknesses of the Catholic religion were laid bare. The new Church of England came into existence, came into being. And John Donne, like some of his contemporaries, felt himself the conflict of faith. His skepticism, his humanism, and his wide learning made him challenge the faith of his ancestors. And the result was that after a good deal of heart, after a good deal of searching, Donne embraced the established Church of England by 1598. 1598. इसको आप नोट भी कर सकते हैं इस पॉइंट को, that Donne embraced the established Church of England by 1598. But it was not until he was ordained in 1615 that he became a confirmed Anglican. Fine. Now, after this, I would like to tell something about the pessimistic, the optimistic, or pessimism, optimism in the age of Donne, because we are studying John Donne. As far as pessimism and optimism is concerned, students, both pessimism and optimism were offshoots of the quest for authority, and it was an age of psychology, it was an age of biography, it was an age of self-analysis at all social levels. And in such circumstances, the spirit of the age became one of doubt and scientific analysis. The stretching of space in astronomy and geography, and the recognition of the great unexplored territories in an expanding world threw man's place in the scheme of things into doubt. So, this is the reason why we see optimism as well as pessimism, and the conflict between the church and state led men to wonder which was superior, and the questioning of the civil authority of where the true sovereignty would lie made it possible to rebel against a king. And the growth of the middle class, the rise of the political parties, and the estrangement of the Puritans led to a very long civil war. Now you remember I had taught you in the history of English literature, Charles I, who began his rule in 1629, following the death of his father, was beheaded in 1649. Whereupon, you must remember, a commonwealth was begun by the Puritans, leading to the eventual dictatorship, military dictatorship of Oliver Cromwell, Richard Cromwell, and which brought some measure of peace and stability to a very turbulent England. But yet, it is true that the idea of a military dictatorship was abhorrent to Englishmen upon Cromwell's death in 1660. So what happened? Parliament again invited Charles II, who was then exiled in France, to return to England and resume the rule of the Stuart kings. The title of Breda was signed by Charles II, because the people, the public, wanted to sign this treaty before taking the crown. And that sign of Treaty of Breda had some points which was promised by Charles II, that he would do all these things in favor of the public, and he did so. So these things really make a good impact when you attempt the answers in your examination, when you have to answer in the interview in any examinations. Fine. Now, as far as John Donne is concerned, we would also like to teach you that John Donne, he was basically the founder of a new school of poetry. Founder of a new school of poetry. इसमें आप क्या समझते हैं स्टूडेंट्स? That it was a time when a wave of romance swept the minds of the creative writers, and so there was a spirit of adventure. There was a spirit of adventure while the writers were writing some of literary output. They were making a lot of efforts to create new literary forms, new literary meters. They were desiring to reject the old traditions and the conventions of themes and expression in the literary writing. And yes, coming to the point, Donne was wholly